guys come on up. Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to finally moderate a panel not in my shorts and button-down shirt today. So that's a big accomplishment. No, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for Symphony for putting all this together, for having us all here today. This will definitely be a great experiment in collaboration doing a hybrid panel, so let's also hope that goes well. So my name is Kevin McPartland. I'm the head of research for market structure and technology at Coalition Greenwich, formerly known as Greenwich Associates. I'm so really excited to be here. Maybe we can just do some quick introductions for the panelists, if you guys wouldn't mind, and then we'll take it from there. Dan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I'm Dan Schleifer. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cosaic. We'll be here today kind of representing FINOS, which is our desktop interoperability platform.
Hi, I'm Jane Gavronsky. I'm the CTO at FINOS, and we host the FDC3 standard as part of our open source ecosystem.
Great. Leslie?
Hi, I'm Leslie Spira. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Glue42. I am wearing shorts, obviously, because I'm at home. But I'm not going to show anybody. Don't worry. Glue42 is a premier desktop integration vendor and fully supporting the FDC3 standard and additional interop features.
Great. And Dietmar?
And hello, Dietmar Fauser. I hope you can hear me. I'm the CIO of Symphony. Unfortunately, I can't be with you because the Biden administration has extended the travel ban by 1 week, so I couldn't make it to New York. Hence, I'm joining here from the lovely south of France.
Good. Well, thanks for being here. So let's start with a really big high-level question, and then we'll slowly dive deeper. I know we've done a lot of research, talked a lot about automation and workflow efficiency and how much of the process has been automated and how much all market participants are thinking about that and working on how to automate more. So with that, and again, forgive the loaded question, Dan, maybe we'll start with you. Does the desktop still matter with so much being automated?
Of course, the desktop very much still matters. It's funny, we live in a world where we're all glued to our mobile phones, and I think if I talk to, I've much younger sisters who are 15 to 22, and if I asked them about using a desktop computer, they would look at me like I was crazy. They also don't check email, which was discussed earlier today. But in our industry, the desktop still reigns supreme, and it is the place where work gets done. And so I think, looking at the modern applications, the legacy applications there on the desktop and figuring out how to streamline those workflows, it's all well and good to say we want the experience in capital markets to be like a mobile phone, and it should be in spirit of everything works with everything else, and it's very user intuitive, but the reality is that the desktop still reigns supreme, and we need to find modern ways of working together with desktop applications.
Cool. Leslie, you want to add anything there?
Yes, I think the analogy with the mobile phones is not great. If I'm a trader, I don't want to be looking at a mobile phone. I want to be looking at a multi-screen setup. We use the word desktop, and people often mishear that to think that we're talking about .NET applications and we're not talking about web applications. So we're talking primarily about web applications running in an environment with major applications like Bloomberg, Outlook, Symphony. And they need to work together, and I need to use them all to get my jobs done. I mean, we like the mobile phone. It's introduced it's popularized some paradigms that have been around for a long time, like right-click intents. But no one wants to trade 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day on a mobile phone. They want a desktop.
Yeah, for sure. It's a cockpit, right? That's been put together, right? Somebody needs to be at the controls of the automation. Dietmar, what else do you want to start us off with on that question?
Yeah, I think for sure the desktop is important. It will stay for the foreseeable future. By this I mean the next years for sure. There are lots of existing applications around that provide value. Now, finding a way to have them interact in a smooth way, and by this erasing human errors and just ease the work of humans in front of their desktop real estate is, I think, what we're going to talk about today. But for sure, desktop and the many applications out there will stay around and will be part of the professional life of many people. Yeah,
for sure. For sure. I couldn't agree more. And Jane, I saved the best for last. So that's a great segue. FDC3, This is a tech conference, so there's lots of acronyms, but in case anybody isn't familiar, maybe could you give us a little bit of a primer on FDC3, why we should care, and then we'll go from there?
So I think we should care because the previous panel said interoperability is really important, right?
Everybody today has. It's been the buzzword of the day, yeah.
So this is, so what we bring to the table with FDC3 and with our other projects is exactly that, standards in how to communicate. And that's what FDC3 is all about. And in order to communicate, it's how you transmit information and what information that you transmit, and standardizing on that will do what the panelists previously had said. Pick up the phone, talk to each other, communicate, agree on how you want to do something. That's exactly what we bring is a neutral, non-commercial space. It already exists. It's open source collaboration, open source and open standard. Community meetings, in fact, one happened earlier today on FDC3. And it's a place where the vendors and the buy side and the sell side, the fintechs can all come together and agree on something so that standard goes beyond just the particular desktop, but starts working with business use cases that are relevant to everybody, to multi-party communication, whether it's in-house with across business functions or it's across organizations.
So, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in on that. And first off, thank you guys for hosting the standards group. I think it's probably worth pausing for just a moment to define what it is that we're talking about when we talk about desktop interoperability on this panel, because interoperability has been kind of a big word of the day. If it's been your drinking game to take a shot every time it was said, my condolences. I think interoperability just means two things working together, and we've been doing that for a long time, right? Software integration is not a new thing, but in the past, software integration has been generally bilateral. So I run a piece of software, you run a piece of software, we talk to each other, we get in a room, we figure out what we want to communicate back and forth. I write an API, you write an API, we write a bunch of software that connects those things, or maybe one or both of us already has APIs. And that's a very bilateral kind of approach to interoperability. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently, it's worked. What we're talking about here in having a standard, we always talk about fix, we were talking about this off stage, is how do we all have one standard so that we all speak the same lowest common denominator? Not everything, right? It doesn't need to account for everything, it shouldn't account for everything, but how do we make it so that one of the fintechs that we saw on stage today writes to a single API specification and their software can work with other vendor software, and they've never met that vendor before. They've never spoken with that vendor before, and that piece of software that's speaking FDC3 can interoperate with other applications that they have no agreement with and can live inside Leslie's desktop platform, Glue42, or my own Finsamble, and that's fine. And so that's kind of what this is a common language for applications specific to finance and cap markets to speak to each other.
And Leslie, maybe, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I agree with everything that Dan said, but I think we'll take it back a bit further. So trading is all about communication. It always has been. It starts with two people arguing about the price of a pig in some market hundreds of years ago, and then you end up with centralized electronic orders, and as technology starts to come into that communication, and then everything changes. You have order books, price discovery, volume, liquidity discovery, automated trading. So bringing technology into that communication, which has always existed, absolutely fundamentally changes everything. And I think that interop, as Dan says, is about communication between applications. The key wording in the FDC3 charter is without prior arrangement. So exactly, these two apps may never know each other, and they may only come together in one user's desk, maybe an internal app and some third-party app. And because of the agreements we make in FDC3, James spoke about us discussing and agreeing stuff, which eventually happens, but not without some fraught discussions. But the way technology changes that conversation and that communication is key, and I think that's what we're seeing with what's happening in the desktop interop with FDC3, acknowledging the fact that there are lots of different applications out there, lots of different platforms, And Symphony, with its recent commitment to FDC3, provides another really important entity to chat to. And whether that's Symphony as an application or the people using Symphony messages or the applications and bots working in Symphony, we're going to see massive changes and improvements, I think, in users' experience because of this.
And Dietmar, what does this do? Why is this so important to Symphony? Let's just cut to the chase.
Well, a couple of key aspects have already been mentioned. I mean, we are very much for open standards, for partnership, and we conceive Symphony fundamentally as an open platform. So why is this important? Because it allows for applications to be less bound together. So the concept of loose coupling is something important to computer scientists to avoid tightening applications too heavily together. It allows for multiple customers of ours to have different workflows with different applications that run together because they speak the same commonly agreed language, that is FDC3 here, which is really, it is an interoperability standard. And we, I hope, move this as an industry collectively forward together to ensure that we have as many applications that are compliant, that we agree on how identity can be conveyed across, that we have a common view on what really is a global context that we share between the applications. All of this to tie together a relatively heterogeneously grown environment of existing applications that will not be rewritten completely, and there will be no one single solution for all the problems, for all usages and customers. So we fundamentally support this for all of these reasons, and beyond this, I'm firmly convinced that Symphony has, as we have a very broad network and many endpoints that we control, more than 500,000, we can take FDC3 also beyond the desktop and send FDC3 events to applications that are not living on the desktop, which allows for yet another step in making end-to-end workflows smoother and better integrated between the different actors.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind, sorry, Kevin, I just want to, for the audience, what Dietmar was talking about, I think can't be, and the post that he put up on LinkedIn and Symphony's official position there can't be understated, right? So Symphony is this incredible network, and even if we ignore for a moment the concept of chat and we just think of Symphony as a network, Symphony is the place where communication and collaboration is happening. And we were talking about this off stage, which is that there's kind of, communication is how action items are resolved or action items are created. So, you and I talk and agree that we're going to do something. Maybe that's just scheduling lunch. We then have to go off to our calendars, I think as Jane pointed out, and go schedule that. And so that communication platform is critical. Desktop interoperability becomes that next step to go from the communication to the applications where we do the work. And so this idea that Dietmar just put out there of how do we build end-to-end workflows that go from the applications where I'm doing my work to the communication that I have with you about doing something together, all the way across the Symphony network to then the applications where you do the work. And that's where we're going to get and are seeing these really streamlined, efficient workflows that automate a huge part of the work and allow the people involved to be, as we heard about in the operations panel, supervising it, looking at it, doing the critical thinking, really maximizing our people not to be copying and pasting and moving back and forth between applications, but to do their best work and to really be thinking.
Yeah, and to expand on that, what's also interesting is classically, at least on the sell side where I spent a large chunk of my career, when people talk about desktop, they talk about a particular function. So you've got the trading desktop, you've got the operations desktop, and everybody's got their own desktop. And the communication is for that particular business function within the realm of what that function does. But increasingly, we see data and workflow moving across these functional areas, even within one corporation. Now, those are conceptually different desktops, but they now need to communicate. So wouldn't it be great if the operations desktop got all these event and notifications and was able to acknowledge back for settlement, for payment, for just back office processing, right? The regulatory reporting got notifications right away. Risk management got notifications right away. So you're broaching the desktop functionally, and that's also quite important. And there's been a lot of work that's already exists, but you can sort of build on that work with a standard and just go beyond what already functionally exists. But at the same time, you can also take it across organizations. So you can take it between the asset manager and the custodian. And it becomes, so the world sort of opens up quite significantly, very quickly, as long as we're all talking the same standard.
And so that was going to be my next question: is do we need everybody to agree and use the same standard to make it successful? And then to that question, how far along that curve does it feel like we are at this point? Is there broad adoption both within those big firms that have a lot of their own interoperability issues, and then amongst the broader sort of financial markets community?
So we do have quite a few banks who participate in our meetings regularly, who are active users of the FDC3 standard. We have vendors who are coming in and collaborating as well as fintechs. And we do see a lot of interest from the buy side as well. And shameless plug, next week is our OSSF, our conference. And a lot of these guys are going to be here as well. And one of the working sessions is to bring use cases together to talk as a group about what are the priority use cases that people want to see that advance the business forward.
And
I think, Jane, can I say one thing? I think Jane was very good not to plug FINOS's great connections with the Biden administration, because you'll notice the travel regulations will have changed by the time the FINOS conference starts, so people from Europe can come in. I mean, I'm just saying. Someone should have donated more.
I pulled what strings I could to keep my competitor out of the country for this, but I couldn't do it for both. So I would just throw into what Jane was saying there around adoption, which is, 18 months ago, if you asked me about FDC3, I would say most people's opinion were, oh, that's interesting. It has promise. It's probably the future, right? All great things, but none of those things say, I'm using it today. All of my development teams are using it today. The applications that I'm using are actually implementing FDC3. That has changed. We are working with, we have both sell-side and buy-side customers that have now officially put out the edict that all in-house built applications will speak FDC3. And we're working with vendors, and it's, I started Cosaic as ChartIQ. We still have ChartIQ as a product for pre- and post-trade charting. Right, we started that, and our biggest problem was, as a vendor, how do I get onto the capital markets desktop? How do I get connected into their workflow? Right now is the golden era for fintechs, because not only do all of the buy sides and sell sides want these pieces of software, but now they can write to a single API and get access to every desktop on the street, regardless of what other applications are in place. So I think we've crossed the chasm, stopped rolling the rock uphill every day like Sisyphus, whatever analogy you want to use, and it is rolling downhill and gathering steam. And I was at OSSF in London, and hearing people on stage talking through actual use cases and how it's solving their problems, how they want to extend the standard around certain spaces, and not just front office sales and trading, but operations and middle and back office functions. And so I think we're there. It's no longer this is a thing that will be a thing. It's here and now.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
I think that, I don't know, maybe it was mentioned in earlier things about email. And the problem with email, we send a message from one place to another, one user to another, one organization to another, and it's an email. And it gets forgotten. To get action takes work. And what FDC3 and Symphony can offer is this communication that can be directly actioned, and to start to avoid this constant email chain backwards and forwards by actually turning this communication directly into action. I think that's one of the big benefits of desktop interop with something like Symphony, this idea of getting away from long email chains, trying to make stuff happen.
So Dietmar, we give you some airtime. So technologists, it seems like technologists get why this matters. Obviously, we're talking to some of them now. when you have these conversations, how do you convince end users to care about another technology acronym protocol and understand how big of a deal it is?
Well, I use one of my inner convictions, that is, if you have open source in action, when an industry starts committing into a common software layer or common standard, there is no escape from it. I mean, we have seen this in other industries at scale, Linux, Kubernetes. There are many examples out there that have, I think, shown and proven that there is no way against open standards. I mean, just trying to maintain something proprietary while the industry starts agreeing in the fact that there is no fundamental competitive advantage in defining the protocol, the language, the standards, however we want to call this. I think this is the key argument. And there is, to me, I believe there is no good rationale not doing it. And people understand this. Open source is taking this in many areas, in many different industries. And I think we as an industry in the financial sector have understood this and start joining our forces to solve common problems. And we all want to take the friction out of the system. We all want to have more efficiency in the way we are working, and it's just a good way of doing it. So we have the existing applications, we have the networks, we have the way through Symphony and other means to convey highly structured objects across applications on a desktop, over the network, between different applications. So I think there is not so much of convictional work to do. It's more a matter of pushing the standard forward and ensure that we get the most out of it and reach the biggest common denominator that we can possibly agree upon.
I think it's also interesting, we talked a little bit about this, the example of Bluetooth, for example, where it used to be kind of clunky to connect things, but now everything is connected through Bluetooth. So part of the challenge, I think, in explaining what open source brings to the table is seeing the future beyond what your point of reference is today. A lot of us are limited in that, right? We didn't know why we needed a smartphone. Now all sorts of things happen in a smartphone that we never imagined. My favorite is clicking on an address and having maps come up and map it for you.
I did that on the way here.
We recently came out with a survey. We did a state of open source and financial services survey. And one of the top things that comes out is not only solving problems that you have today, which becomes infinitely more efficient if you use standards and open source as part of that, but also that most people believe that the opportunity in innovation is going to be enabled by open source. And that's the part that you kind of don't see beyond the hill. So you first have to come and play, and the way we talk about it is we talk about sort of enlarging the pie, right? So everybody gets to participate. You're not cutting anyone out. You're actually bringing more people into the ecosystem. Bringing more people brings more minds, more ideas, and then you can see beyond the hill. And that's when the innovation is going to come.
I think we were talking about the Bluetooth example off stage. I think the smartphone one is a great example. In hindsight, you recognize them. And I think, we were talking about FIX and FDC3, and if you said right now, oh, I don't speak FIX, no one's going to trade with you. Like you couldn't say, well, we have our own protocol, we don't use FIX. Like no one would take you seriously, nobody's going to trade with you. And I think, we will look back, we were talking about this prediction, we will look back in 5 years and say the same thing about FDC3. Maybe it takes 7 years, maybe it takes 10, I don't know the time frame, but we will look back on it in the exact same way. You won't buy software from a vendor that doesn't speak FDC3, and you won't have an internal development team that is not just building new software, but going in and updating your .NET, your Java, your C++, your legacy applications. Every single one of them will speak FDC3.
I think, or if they don't, people like you and I, Dan, our companies, will have provided the conversion. So I can think of the two biggest terminals, neither of which have FDC3 support at the moment, and we can allow FDC3 to interoperate those with our own bridges. So it may be that everybody adopts FDC3, and if they don't, then there's a niche for companies like ours to ensure that the majority of people who are using FDC3, the data types and the APIs for their interop can communicate with these big islands of maybe non-FDC3 interop.
And if I may add, let's try to look a little bit forward. It was briefly mentioned on innovation. I'm convinced that we will extract much more data out of unstructured data flows, like chats, phone, so voice conversation, even video in the future. But what will be happening, I'm pretty convinced, is that say you're on a phone conversation and there will be natural language processing modules doing semantic analysis of what's happening there. And out of this populates a context, and FDC3 is proposing the notion of a context. So out of these unstructured flows, we will see the possibility to extract information, show it in a structured way to either an application or a human, and from there propose actions, or even in the future automatically invoke actions out of those unstructured data flows.
And I think we can learn a
This
lot.
is the way forward to think about how we can unlock a completely untapped field and use FDC3 of making sense out of it.
So if I pick up on one of the comments, Leslie, you made, and again, I appreciate with this question, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but is the idea of an in-a-box solution for a trading desk, is that dead? Does that make it so that doesn't have to be the case and everybody's going to pick the pieces they like?
I mean, I think we're already there. I've never seen a trader's desktop where there was one piece of software from one vendor. So the difficult thing is, right, that whole best of breed approach of I want to pick this and that and the other, but they don't talk together. And you have had to some degree people saying, well, I'll take 2 or 3 solutions from this vendor, even though they're not the best in their category, because they do work seamlessly together. And so I think you do see some trade-offs being made around, I would prefer integration over being the best. But I think we're already there. I think the world has been unbundled. I was trying to explain what I did, probably to my mother or something, and I was like, well, how with the TV, you used to just have a cable subscription and you got what channels they gave you for the package that you asked for, and now you say, well, I want Netflix and Disney Plus, but I don't want Hulu or whatever, HBO. But then you need something. You need your smart TV to bring them back together. You kind of need to rebundle and take control over the things that you're buying separately. And so, just like you've got a smart TV that brings all those together so I can search across all my channels for one show using Alexa, you have a smart desktop that pulls all of those applications together. And I think that's been the missing piece from this unbundled, fragmented desktop that our users have been stuck with for so long.
Can I just add one thing, which is Dietmar spoke about looking to the future, which is always incredibly important, but I've been around for a while, and I think looking to the past is also quite important. So when I look at FDC3 and some of the things we can do with interoperability, I'm always reminded of Common VBA, which kind of completely revolutionized what we could do in technology on the trading rooms. And I'm also reminded of how much of a failure DCOM was, because you couldn't identify users in a safe way as you allowed communication between devices. And so it was mentioned earlier, trusted identity. So FDC3, the scope of FDC3 is always open to discussion. There's no real kind of fixed thing. And I think in addition to some things like notification, I think identity is going to be key, because in the same way that common BBA could be a security risk without its appropriate thing, I think this idea of identity, who's allowed to talk to who, and Dan's product has some functionality there, but you need a trusted sign-on. I think some of the stuff that Symphony are talking about there is going to be absolutely key to letting FDC3 be used everywhere, because you have to trust the people who are calling these methods.
I think Leslie makes a great point, and it's interesting because if I'll go and talk to people sometimes and they'll say, oh, we've got an interop platform in place. And it's like, cool, so all of your stuff is connected and seamless for the users. And they're like, well, no. And the definition of interoperability has, the goalposts always move. The definition of interoperability used to be, well, 2 things can speak with each other. Great. Well, Jane and I can get inside the same room, inside the same container, and yell at each other, but if she's speaking in Greek and I'm speaking in English and we're just talking over each other, it doesn't really help. There's no, there's no collaboration happening there. And so it has now evolved into, okay, well, interoperability means having standards around, the communication. I wait for Leslie to stop speaking, he waits for me, vice versa, usually. And we have kind of some protocols and some social norms there. And then you need somebody like a moderator who's going to orchestrate the conversation and make sure that we go from just, cool, I'm sending messages and you're sending messages, to arriving hopefully at some logical place, the end of a workflow. So you need that orchestration layer. And you need some translation along the way, which Leslie talks about with kind of proprietary things. And now we're starting to get into this world where you've got deep, meaningful workflows. I think the identity piece and security piece is kind of the next logical bit. This is something, once you have everybody in a room and we can all talk to each other, not everybody should be allowed to talk. I want to control which applications can send messages to my order management system and which can't. So, that's not something that FDC3 does right now. It is something that our platform and perhaps Leslie's does in its own way. And I think that identity becomes a big piece of that when we say, okay, now I can connect my smart desktop to the Symphony network and I can send a message from my application to an application on the other side of the street. I need that sense of identity, and it has to be guaranteed of, is this really Dietmar that I'm sending a message to? And who is he? Does his organization vouch for him? What do I need to know, not just to guarantee it's Dietmar, but metadata about him? And so I think part of what we saw with Street Links earlier today starts to paint that vision of what that's going to come together. And it is something that's come up for discussion with FDC3, is to incorporate this concept of identity as part of the standard.
Yeah, and first of all, standardize on what's getting communicated. So it's not necessarily to host a particular identity service, but really to standardize who are you, what are you allowed to do, where are you from, what do you want to do?
And so there are real commercial implications over the long term, right? I would think the Apple App Store has created how many companies and how many millionaires or billionaires, right? And it's, what has it been, 15-year life? Does this create opportunities like that for new fintech startups to have an easier time to get to the desktop, to get in front of their users, which still is very, very difficult, right, to get the eyeballs, even if the technology is the best. And then on the flip side, does sort of all this open source make competition for all the big incumbents, right, that maybe they don't want?
This is a little bit related. So last month we hosted OSSF in London, and one of the panel conversation was around RegTech and fintechs, and how do RegTechs, how can they talk to the larger institutions? And there's just so many of them around, and how do the larger institutions consume what are the various products that the RegTechs have to offer? And the feedback was, from someone who was formerly a regulator, was they need to sort of band together to kind of present a single face so that the service consumers can better understand and can better interoperate across the various service providers. And to me, band together equals standardize on communication.
Well, it either means standardize on communication, or it means corporate consolidation, which is not good for innovation or for this industry. And so I think, listen, I can speak as a fintech founder who, started my business 10 years ago next month, I think, as ChartIQ. And we would go into customers and they would say, your charts are better than Bloomberg, better than anything else that we use, but it's too difficult to get you onto the desktop and integrate into the other applications, get my data fed into you, get all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't matter that you're better, we're gonna stick with what we've got. And each and every time I would hear that as an entrepreneur, it's a slap in the face, and it's frustrating. We've got this explosion of fintechs, and the hardest part is getting to market and getting on the desktop. And I think that this does, FDC3 standards and desktop interoperability frameworks level that playing field. And I think it's good for innovation. I think it's good for competition. I think it's good for the fintechs, but I think it's great for the consumers of technology because it actually gives them that freedom of choice. Are we going to get to it's as quick as, connecting your Bluetooth? I don't know, but it's not going to be a 6 to 9 month process like it used to be to get a piece of software on the desktop.
Come on, let's be ambitious.
Well, that's if FDC3 can make the lawyers work faster, that would probably help the process.
Exactly. If we could get some standardization of MSAs, if we could get MSA standardization across this industry, it'd be fantastic.
Or InfoSec standardization for evaluating applications. I mean, the whole thing. And obviously, FDC3, software as a service, all start to address those issues. And if I'm a small vendor and I have to choose which platforms I want to commit to, it's difficult because I'm a small vendor and I want to focus on building my charts or building my news analysis or whatever. And what FDC3 offers is the ability to have that interop, and you don't really care what kind of platforms the user has because FDC3 will work the same on different containers. And that's one of the things that we're working with Dan and people like that to make sure that software vendors can write stuff that runs on Blue 42 and runs on Cosaic and all just works.
It's a great point because I do talk to fintechs all the time who are interested in FDC3 and they're like, well, do I need to pay you for access to Finsamble or whatever? It's like, no, you don't need to be a customer of mine. You don't need to pay Leslie. You don't need to pay OpenFin or anybody else. Write to FDC3. It's one specification. Hopefully we'll have certification coming soon. And you get access to the whole market. You shouldn't have to choose, do I want to distribute via Leslie's platform or Dan? And for you guys who are buy sides or sell sides, if you go with my platform, if you choose Finsamble as your smart desktop, and a year or two from now you're not happy with it, you should be able to lift all of your applications out, drop them into Leslie's platform, and be on your way. Vendor lock-in is a terrible thing and stifles innovation. And so, yes, it provides access to the whole market for fintechs. It also keeps those fintechs innovating and honest because the moment that they're no longer servicing your needs, you can pull them out, pull something back in, and still have integrated workflows. And the same holds true for Leslie and myself.
Although let me say, vendor lock-in, if you can have it, is fantastic. It's just in the world in which open source is key, it's gone. No one wants to commit to that. And so monopoly rents were fantastic for those of you who had them, but they're not coming back, and maybe Apple is a special case, but yeah, they're gone. So I'm a bit sad about that, but that's the industry I'm in and I enjoy working in it.
That's why consolidation will not solve all the problems, because it will create exactly this. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also not to forget that we're, as the community, we're not doing it, the community is doing it. We're trying to enable the developer to be more productive and effective as well. So, for example, recently the Workbench was contributed, and that's to facilitate testing. We're coming out with training on FDC3 as well. So it's not just to solve the business problems, but it's again to enlarge the ecosystem of people who can participate seamlessly in this process.
100%. 100%. We did recently open source the FDC3 Workbench. You guys are doing the training programs. All these things, you can take the Workbench. It's free. It's open source. It's part of FINOS. You can take it, use it to get your applications FDC3 compliant, and use them in my competitor's platform. It's fine. The Workbench works in my competitor's platform because the Workbench itself is written to the standard. And so, the rising tide lifts all boats. The size of the pie increases, and we should all be out there competing for our customers on the merits.
Yeah, this is great. Efficiency, like we brought up in the beginning, efficiency, workflow automation, right? That seems to be all the focus. And yeah, it sort of very much includes the desktop, and again, not just one single solution, but all of these great sort of new innovations we've seen, even over the last 18 months that have come to market. Great. So I think we're just about there. Great conversation. Easy group to moderate. Lots to say. I love it. So thanks again, everybody, for listening. We'll be here if anybody has any other questions. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you. Wonderful panel. That was a great connector to everything we have seen throughout the day. Without integration and interoperability, none of today's demos would have been possible. So thank you all again. Next up, I'm excited to hear from Kristen Brown, Google Cloud's Financial Services Leader, and Ben Chernelik, our President and CFO. Kristen, Ben? welcome to the Innovate stage. Welcome.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, I was saying there are no shots of tequila. There's just water. I figured, we'd have this, get ready for happy hour. It's, get the start early.
Happy hour is right around the corner. So we'll be there in no time. As we come into our last session for this year's Innovate, I couldn't think of a better person and a better company to wrap up our theme of connecting people. Kristen Brown is at Google Cloud. She's the strategy lead and head of strategy and solutions for financial services. And we're really excited to hear about the strategy of Google Cloud, all the things that they've been working on. I think certainly everyone here has interacted with Google in some capacity, but I think for a lot of people, this may be the first time live or in person we hear specifically about their strategy in capital markets and how they're thinking about working with all of us and our businesses as we're driving efficiency and workflow through everything we do in our industry. So thank you, Kristen, for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So maybe just to kind of get the conversation going, can you talk a little bit about the breadth and scope of your role and how you're approaching strategy development, strategy implementation for Google Cloud as we're thinking about capital markets and financial services?
Sure. If you've seen even in our earnings report that just came out, Sundar was asked the question, what's the difference? Why is Google and especially cloud performing? And it's because we've doubled down on our industry focus and focusing on our critical and key industries, which financial services is, and capital markets is a large part of that. So our strategy is within FSI is multi-pronged, right? It's understanding that there is different segmentation right within FSI that capital markets, insurance, banking are definitely unique entities and have different capabilities they need. And how can we, across those sub-verticals, actually provide the ecosystem and the hyperscaling, right, to support the end-to-end. So, how do we have the digital natives connected to these larger institutions, which has kind of been the overarching part. And how do we help foster collaboration? How do we extend the open source ecosystems that need to interrupt, especially within capital markets?
It's exciting. We as Symphony have been spending a lot of time with Google Cloud. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the session. But the innovation that they're bringing to capital markets is truly remarkable. Can you talk a little bit about some of the innovative things that are either on your mind, your team's mind, and things that the audience here should know about when they think Google Cloud and financial services?
Sure. Well, it's kind of hard to not talk about Google Cloud and our AI and ML. So we are definitely doubling down, and I might be a little biased, but also on our data and data analytics capabilities and enabling the ecosystem. This is why it was great that we're partnering together, and we're building more of those partnerships with the digital natives and with the overall ecosystem. You guys are the experts in financial services. We want to bring the technology expertise and bridge it together to then have those solutions for cross-industry, cross-capabilities. And part of the technology that we're bringing forward is, I don't know if, how many have heard, but there's a Cloud Next that just took place, and we actually have this concept called now distributed cloud. So it's how do we bring the public cloud and the edge and our network, Google, we have our own network. We own the entire thing end-to-end over the globe. It's, from the C cable down to the chips in the servers. So we're bringing those capabilities and that kind of technology, right, to down to the core to our capital markets customers so that they can enable, their innovations that they're trying to prove on the best platform to do it.
And building off of that, we had the CIO of Zoom talk a little bit earlier, and he gave some views on the state of technology in capital markets and financial services. As you're looking at the technology platforms at the different clients you're working with, how would you characterize their current technology platform, and what are you as Google looking to do to help innovate on those platforms?
Well, across all of financial services, I would say that capital markets actually is ahead. When you look at how banking and insurance, if you put the kind of big three, but who's catching up is the payments, payments providers. I think that both payments and capital markets understand technology, right? You need it, you need answers faster than your competition, right? Or you need to be able to process your algorithms. You need to be able to crunch your data faster. So they are all in on adopting, and they also are all in on connecting, right? So it's not necessarily that it used to be in capital markets that you had to build it all internally, but now it's that adoption of building an ecosystem and having your other tech partners, be they fintechs, regtechs. And that's what we're trying to do, is build the platform where everybody can come together, use all the technology, and have, foster the collaboration across the entire ecosystem.
So you're thinking that payments technology is ahead of settlements technology?
I actually do. but I'm saying it's, real-time settlements to the legit real time is, I don't think it's out of the fray of things with how fast fraud and money laundering, all these kind of capabilities that AI and ML are enabling. I don't think it's as far off as people think. And it's actually being able to stay ahead of the bad actors. And I think you'll be able to do that versus, backwards looking. It'll be more proactive instead of reactive.
So I think when you think of innovation on the payment side, and you think of fintech, right? That's where a lot of the new companies and real competitors to traditional financial services organizations are emanating from.
Yep.
When you're seeing capital markets firms showing success in innovation, are they doing a high percentage of that from a proprietary basis and their internal technology teams developing, or do you see the most successful firms with broader partnerships and embracing new entrants to the industry?
In probably the last 3 years, it's exactly that. Who's adopting the ecosystem and thinking of it as an ecosystem? Because, even if you have hundreds of thousands of developers, it's still that you can fall back on those, traditional ways of doing software development, where if you have a partner who already has a product and it's just a matter of, hey, I give you a set of feature requests, and then, hey, I can collaborate and integrate these other, and microservices, APIs, right, that whole transition of how applications and platforms are put together makes it much more that you can, swap in and out, and by adopting, who's got the best at the time, you don't always have to do it yourself. Those are the ones that are going faster. Everybody talks about Robinhood, right? Like, look what happened in that environment. But what's their strategy? It's all digital native and adopting the part of the ecosystem. So it's fun to watch.
Interesting. So building off of that, when you think about a logical next question is around information security. And when you talk about partnering with firms and having external organizations come into your infrastructure, your technology stack, the first question that we get, other industry participants get, is from the CISO on, tell me about how you're going to protect my data, how you're going to ensure that what we have is not visible to others, and how are you handling our precious and sometimes often market-moving information. And what's your perspective on that from the financial services industry relative to where people probably think of Google as more of the individual side,
right,
where
like
data's all over the place?
A lot of people have the misconception that Google is just consumer, right? But that's part of the shift, right? But why we're going in on is towards the enterprise. From the beginning, believe it or not, we have had it's this concept of, we call it zero trust. So we are a cloud provider that from the chip that is in the machine to the network to the actual physical devices that your data is stored on is 100% we own the supply chain and end to end, and can tell you exactly where it was made, the data was made, the 6 people that were making it, what machines, how it transferred to that. And the fact of our encryption at all the levels. We even make our own security keys that we enable, HSMs, all that kind of stuff that we put together, and we take like security and data privacy is the 2 paramount things, even in the consumer market, but even more so in the enterprise, that we bring forward. And that's part of, one of our core tenets of when you come work with us, that's, we want to work with you and show you exactly, because there is a misconception, right? That people think the cloud, it's scary, it's safe, and it's less secure. And we actually want to show folks that actually it's quite different, because we think we have a pretty good security proposition that we may be able to prove to you that we have more security than your actual data center. So that's one of our core tenets.
So what are the common questions that you get when you meet with a new global commercial bank or insurance company or some of the financial services, and they're not as familiar with Google Cloud as they may be with other cloud providers, or they're just not experienced with a model where data is outside of their environment. What are people asking you? And what's top of mind for?
Well, always for anywhere in financial services, it's their favorite friends are the regulators. That's their people they like to talk to every single day. So they always ask, what's my regulator going to tell me? Like if I tell them I'm working with Google Cloud, and do I have a big giant red X on my on my chest now? And that, right? Where is my risk? Because it's all about where operational risk and position risk, all that stuff, right? Is how does this affect my risk, and is my chief risk officer going to go down in flames if we make these kind of decisions? So that's where we always start the conversation and explain. We're very transparent, and we've been building a whole portfolio of applications on top, like our security command center and compliance center, that allows you to have all that transparency and a dashboard, right? Similar to the concepts you guys have been doing for the buy, sell side, but on the technology and operations side is how can you see that in a single pane of glass, so that if you have ISO standards or SEC, you can go through your portfolio and look through the frameworks and find out where you're flaming red or you might have issues, or that you can actually print the reports off, hand it to your regulator, and say it's for transparency. So that's what we're trying to do, is be as transparent as possible. And the fact that we are always big on open source, right? So we are, Kubernetes was born and raised inside of Google, and that's kind of one of the big parts is we don't, concentration risk is a big, to add to the risk theme. So we're trying to show and build more and more of our platform with Anthos, with Kubernetes, about how adopting the open architectures and the multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, meeting folks, so that you can interoperate between the cloud on-prem or multi-cloud providers and your on-prem, but manage it in a way that it's cohesive and understood.
And are you finding more of your business opportunities are displacement of existing cloud providers? There's a lot out there. Or are you seeing that firms are deciding now's the time to move infrastructure and different levels of criticality from internally managed to a cloud environment that they have someone like Google Cloud come in and
Right. For capital markets, it definitely was, the pandemic was a big cursor for us of, we got to show off of, hey, guess what? If there is no trading floor, we can help you simulate the same environment and keep, in a secure way, even though, Bob's on the couch and Sue's at the kitchen table, you can still have that same experience, as a trading floor, but in a remote, disconnected way. So that was been a big piece, but it also depends on the market, right? Like retailers, of course, it's not that hard retailers obviously want to do lots of work, but for a whole host of other reasons. But it is I would say it's a mix. One is that because we just want to show everybody that front and center we take our technology serious and about innovating the technology. Especially around AI and ML, our like I said, our chipsets, our GPUs, our TPUs, like down to the core of how your algorithms are going to process, and assuring that the same way you run it, it's going to run exactly the same every single time, and you're not scratching your head like, what the heck, I ran it here on-prem and it did this, and then I put it somewhere else and it went off the rails. We're trying to have that whole seamless experience for the capital markets environment.
And I assume that ties into the strategy of accelerating cloud deployments. I think certainly in capital markets, financial services, for many years, everyone wanted to own the full technology stack.
Yep.
And anything outside of complete control was exposing data to people that shouldn't see it, and there was risk associated with it, and it was just better to keep everything inside. And little by little, we've seen, whether it's Salesforce or the cloud companies or all the other ASP type organizations, there's different approaches to managing cloud and managing data. How does, from your business strategy standpoint, how do you think about, what are you guys doing to accelerate cloud adoption and getting people really comfortable that this is the future and this is how capital markets and financial services should operate from a tech stack perspective, as opposed to feeling that everything has to be so closed and proprietary?
We start with if you look at the center is the data itself. Because we have met lots of companies who have lots of data. Like data is not in short supply. But the problem is they are getting no information out of their data. So that is what we show them, is that, you might think the cloud is a big bad thing, but let's just start without your PII or your, data that you're like, oh geez, that's like handing the keys over. And just from the this whole structured, unstructured data elements, how do you take your unstructured data, combine it with your structured data, and just run an auto ML type queries or base analytics, and people are shocked at the insights just from that, right? Non-intrusive. So that's kind of where we started as the core for how to bring onto cloud, is starting with data and data wrangle, because that is a huge problem and it's so expensive, right? You look today, there's copies of data all over the place. Like, how do you really get to a trusted source? I could talk for hours about this problem, but that's really the core of where we start with most enterprises, is that we can help you get the information out of your data.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more. This is an industry that runs off data, whether it's market data, information, trade data, right? It's an information-based industry. Yeah. And when you think of what Google Cloud and Google Analytics can do with data, what are some of the examples that you talk to traders, portfolio managers, other participants in capital markets on? You're creating all this data, it's going all over the place, but you're actually not harnessing it in any way that's useful to you. And maybe in a lot of circumstances, you're just giving it away to others, and it's actual real value that you're not capturing as a firm. So
one example I'll use is like investment research,
okay,
right, which is a really expensive and lots, right? There's lots of data scientists in all on that side of the house. For investment research to work, you need the workflow and you need a platform. And that's exactly how we go to them. It's like, we're not going to be better at investment research, but we're going to give you the tools in the environment to have that, seeking alpha, searching for alpha is like gold, right? And that's exactly what we do. And we also give the data capabilities that you can explore data sets, right? Because part of it is you have to do, it's like gold mining, right? You're doing lots of expedition, oil, gold mining, right? You're doing lots of exploring expedition, and, try it before you buy it, And how do we set up that environment so they can do lots of that prospecting to find that gold that then they can turn into actual products and services? So that's kind of, one of the examples of things that we're helping, because we have the platform that you can do those things, right? You can try to prospect and you can search for data, all in one ecosystem, and not end up having to put a new, TCAP line in, or another feed set up, to go through. Yeah.
How long does it take for the clients that you talk to get to that oh wow moment of, we've been operating a trade infrastructure this way for a long time, this is how we do it, and then you're able to do some analytics, provide different types of data back to them, reports, and is it a quick, yes, we need to do this, or is it a longer, interesting, but...
It depends on the institution, right? So I would say the digital natives, we can have one conversation, show them a couple of demos of things, and they're like, we're sold, right? Where can we sign? The more ingrained, true Wall Street cap markets firms, because it's so counter to, and it's kind of like you have to move the Titanic, right? Like, that's how they phrase it, right? They don't want to hit the iceberg, right? So it really depends on but it's a case of, we get a lot of traction, especially in the data science areas, where they just are like, wow, this is a lot more efficient than what we're trying to do. But other parts, right, I think it's across the whole market, right? It's not just Google Cloud, it's all cloud. They're still afraid of cloud. And it's just, we have to, show them we're not the big bad wolf. It's actually, it's actually probably where they can do a lot more than they realize.
Well, from our experience, you're certainly not the big. I think everyone's heard a lot about Symphony strategy over today, and the things that we've really been working on as a company. It was a really busy summer for us. We brought Cloud9 into the Symphony organization. We brought StreetLinks into the Symphony organization. We spent a lot of time talking to market participants and our customers and clients about our strategy and where we're focusing. And we signed a very strategic partnership with you and the Google Cloud team, which was something that, in the whole scheme of partnerships and the breadth of it, happened pretty quickly. So I have a good sense from our side how we got to the decision. But in your role, when someone Brian walked in, the team walked in and said, hey, we want to partner with Symphony, and here's what we're thinking.
Yep.
Like, what was your reaction? How did you think about it? And why was it eventually something that you said, yes, we really want to spend time and investment and commit to this type of partnership?
Well, one, our strategies going forward are very aligned,
Yeah.
right? And we both are big champions for open source. It's one of those. It's like easy. It's easier when you have the fundamentals of like the core strategies to our strategy matches yours very well. And we also had similar goals about how AI and ML could be applied in this market space. And you guys are doing a lot of cool things. And we thought there was actually some of our engines could make your stuff even cooler. So. That's kind of where, Brian will tell you, we sit down and look at, where's kind of the gaps we can help fill in your portfolio already to force multiply and, supersize what you're already doing, and then innovate, right, extend through it. So that's when we set up the partnerships. That's what we're trying to do, because that's what we want to, like, literally, we want to be the ecosystem and the platform that the markets can run on, and how do we, force multiply everybody across the board.
And what type of feedback have you been receiving from your partnerships that you're doing with Symphony, your other industry partnerships? Do you feel that there's a real reception to the strategy?
Yeah, if you notice, that's actually where we're doubling down, is having more partnerships. Like you'll see some more of these announcements even coming in the next couple of weeks.
All right.
In capital markets. That's what it is we're doubling down with the industry partners because how do we get better at serving the industry other than partnering with the leaders in the industry, and letting you guys do great things, and then coming back to us and saying it would be even better if you could do X, Y, So that's what we, having that innovation channel between our partners and the market. So partnering within the industry is definitely one of our core tenets.
Yeah, and we're very excited about it. We're a Google Workplace organization. We use Google products quite frequently across, and we're seeing more and more every day use cases of, here's a Google application, a Google workflow that just aligns directly with a Symphony approach. And I think as we go through the next months, quarters, years, we're going to see a real kind of symbiotic partnership between the two organizations. And we're excited about the capabilities that Google can bring into Symphony. And then by extension, those are capabilities that we can deliver out to our client set.
Yeah. I also think with you and I was going to say Dietmar, if he was here, he'd be shaking.
He's up there.
I was going to say he's shaking his head at me. But also, to the converse of our applications, right, is, like I said, you guys are the experts, is how do we, instead of the Google inside, like have the Symphony inside, right, kind of converse, that you'll start seeing more of that in the ecosystem, right, on Google Cloud. It's that you'll be like, oh, I didn't realize, we're doing the stuff with Workspace, but also has a direct integration at Symphony. Or, our App Engine, oh, look at that. There's something from Symphony that now we can spin up. So it's those kind of things, too, that we're trying to do is make it so that, your customers, as they're working in the environment, they want to connect to all their partners. It's an easy integration in a matter of, 2 clicks away, and you're connected.
Yeah, definitely exciting. I think the simplicity of that integration is what is going to drive the success of so many of the different things that we're doing. So we're coming up with only a couple minutes left, so a few more questions. Whenever I have a chance to spend time with a Googler, there's always so much about your company that we want to learn. People want to know. Right? So just kind of open-ended question. And it's not specific to financial services, sure. But what are some things about Google that you would like the audience to know that we may not know, whether it's a product, a feature, a functionality, something new that's happening that you're able to talk about? I mean, there's just so much innovation that happens, and it's exciting to have that in capital markets, but we also all have a relationship with Google outside of work. So what are some things that are fun to talk about?
Well, some of the cool things we're doing that actually indirectly helps capital markets is, are you guys familiar with Google Earth Engine? So we literally have our own planes, our own helicopters, our own massive digital sets of satellites. And we have now literally mapped the globe and even to the geo level, where we've run these sonar, LiDAR, right? So think of Street View, but at the planet scale, right? Where, across oceans. Well, now we actually have it commercially available, where now, right? So think of anybody who's got to deal with ESG, right? The favorite topic of now, Everybody in capital markets is like, where can we find the data to figure this all out? That's part of what we're trying to help, because sustainability is a huge part. We want people to come to our cloud because that's the other thing is when you're running on our cloud, you know that it's carbon neutral or zero carbon, right? That's the other part. As you're executing and delivering great compute takes a lot of energy, but we're working out, and doing it so that it is not an impact, and we're using renewable, sustainable energy. So, but to that end is then how do we allow the data for all the folks who have to figure out these calculations and the regulations that are coming? So to me, that's one of the cool new things. And how we're now giving, making all the secret sauce that we've had, in Google Maps and Waze when you're like, wait, why did I just turn left, right? Like it's all that part and the imagery and actually tabular data that has developed these products is now going to be available for folks to tap into, which, as you're trying to come up with your ESG type portfolio, it'll be super helpful to understand, floods, fires, all these, natural disaster patterns. It's all going to be out there. So that's probably
And it all comes back to the data.
Yes.
Right? Being able to harness new types of
Yes.
data,
Yeah.
bring it into an investment decision process, and
Yes. Yep.
it's pretty interesting stuff. Anything else on your mind that you want to comment on? Or
one other area just would be in our AI capabilities.
Yeah.
So I don't know, again, if you guys have followed, but Google, we bought a company called Brain, and they're now called as Google Brain, which is and DeepMind. And now we've combined their superpowers of coming up with new forms and then matching on top of quantum computing. So just be on the lookout, because a lot, natural language processing is now getting to a point where we have so much training and capabilities that it's there's gonna be a lot of cool things that come out in that space where your interactions and the security around it. That's the part that today, right? Wouldn't you love to be able to talk to your Google Home and do bank transactions or investment transactions and those kind of things? And
we've heard that several times
Yes.
today from speakers talking about products of, I know it works, why can't I just use my voice to make it work?
Exactly. Right. And the security, because the biggest part is the security, right? Like it's not an easy feat, but I'm excited about the things that are coming around in that area especially.
Yeah, and I think those all tie in very well to what we're doing with Symphony around voice interaction, around the trading, chat, collaboration, and then connectivity and identity with what we brought in with StreetLinks. Yeah. So, well, thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me.
This has been I think a great way to wrap up Innovate. Odette's going to come up for some final words, then bring Brad on stage. But Kristen, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
So thank you to our president and CFO, Ben Chernelik, for hosting this wonderful conversation with Google Cloud, our partner. Brad, nice to see you. I feel like I can give you a mic to drop, maybe.
Many mics have dropped today.
It's
been great.
It's been great.
Really phenomenal.
I agree.
Impressive.
So, Brad, what were your top highlights or biggest takeaways? You've obviously been in the space for over 30 years now. The current pace of innovation, it's like something we've never seen. How does that inform your decision making and the way you lead at Symphony?
Thank you for just setting me off. So I have 13 top highlights, roughly. And I just tried to keep track of the day. So it all comes back to the data, that last statement. It really does. But then it's about how you use it, obviously. So I'm just going to highlight moments from the day that I thought really tied the beginning to the end and a lot in the middle. So Mike Lynch, he talked about this step function biological evolution that may be happening, and it happens in time. And it's usually a function of some external factor. It really feels like that's happening, and I thought Mike was spot on in bringing that forward. Kate brought up the real-time collab, real-time resolve. This batch process, we can deal with it tomorrow. It's waiting in my email inbox. It must go away, and I thought that was a great statement. And then every demo today you saw was a real roadmap that was live. People really looked together, like whether it was us as Sims or people that worked with us. It felt like a very chummy group in a good way. Clearly people are working together. This isn't the first time they've tried to do what they did on stage today, but it was really massively complex. It almost went too well. It was simple. And some of the things that were accomplished today in these demos was far from simple. So that mass complexity simplified is really what we're about. Then to hit the participants of the day, Jane, open drives innovation. I think that's clear to the world after the last 10 or 20 years. When you're more open, you will be more innovative. When you share and crowdsource, you will do more. It came up a lot in the Interop panel. I couldn't agree with it more. Colin at QI, information overload is a thing. It's a thing for our kids, it's a thing for us, it's a thing for the industry. It's a fact. Jim at FTS with the Sycamore team of Marie and Olivier, there's a last gen, current gen, next gen thing going on right now, right? From the boomers to the iGen, and it really is a generational transformation. Part of this will be what creates that step function up. And some of us digital immigrants have to really play the game of being native, because if we don't, it will go. And then the generational move that you saw when you saw Sycamore and Jim, very different generations working together, and then even Jerry Starr and Corey and Dana, his daughters. That was a really, really an awesome moment. And for Jerry to see his daughters being the people that are doing this after having been at the company for years. Harry Mosley, he used the word profound times. I'm not sure any of this is actually that important, but it might be. But the times we're in are really kind of epic and book writing material, the last 5 years and maybe the next 10. So these are profound times. Zoom really found a way to support that moment and just deal with it, going from a startup to a scale up, and really scaling to the future before you need it. And that I thought was a great message for all of us. Do it before you have to. And the early innings point, which I agree. My buddy Fred Cornier came in with we ops have innovated. We've innovated a bit, which I agree. The ops community has actually done a decent amount of innovation in the last years, but there's just so much more to do and so much more risk and so many more pain points. Rochelle, Dina, Giant Matt, 6'7" Matt, real-time tangible progress, going after a market that has 0 STP and getting to 65% in a month or two, not fathomable several years ago at a place like Citi. Kristen hit on the importance of security at Google and the leveraging of open source. You heard it a lot on the Interop panel. I believe in it. I've been out in front on that, and we're now back at that table really trying to drive it, and you heard Dietmar all in on that as well. And then obviously the Interop panel. If there's one buzzword of the day, if you watch Bravo and, what's the drinking word, says Andy, it is interop. Today, the word interop occurred, I'm not sure, hundreds of times maybe, but it is the thing. I started with the Gaia, which is this idea of many things operating as one system and interop whether you like it or not, and that's the Earth with us on it. And then the idea of Novacine, which is, you really becoming one with tech while you remain the human that you're actually designed to be. And it's not over there technology, it's actually us. We're building it, we're using it, and it's becoming so much of a blend that you really can't separate, where the tech ends and the human begins, which is both a problem, but once you realize it, it's probably an asset for all of us to just move forward as a combined world. But again, human-led and ultimately connecting people with purpose. So we're going to end the day here. I know it's been a long one. Thank you so much for being in the room all day. I know people don't get out a lot, but still sitting in one room for so long is not easy, and listening and seeing. Hopefully you were interested. Thank you, everybody online. I think we've had great participation online. Yeah. And again, as we roll forward in the next month, you'll see a lot of these come back in our roadmap, in how we pitch the industry, selling, but also how we pitch the industry, to evolve to a better place incrementally, but really clearly over the next several years. So thank you very much for coming, and hope you had a great day. I did.
Thank you. Fist bump.
Yeah, I don't.